guys are good. I'm super excited to be here, and you know, God just has a way of working in ways we don't often understand. And tell me if it's okay. I know we've got cameras working here. Is it okay if I'm out here, out front like this? Is that okay? All right, good. And I want to make sure I have slides, because I understand that sometimes we hear things, sometimes we see things, we learn in different ways. So I like to do all of that to try to help you really get the content. But I do think God has a plan for how things unfold in life. The older that I get, the more I realize that. And very often I don't know in the moment, don't understand it. But I've also learned to be okay with not knowing and understanding how and why things happen. But the point is, can you look for the positive in whatever is happening? And we're going to talk about that, on how we choose resilience over resistance and how we shift mindset. And when Dennis and I were kind of talking about what I present, I have a normal summit talk that I often give where I sort of just tell the story of my journey as a leader. But I'm going to go ahead and tell them about the books. Is that okay? So I wrote a book a couple of years ago all on the journey of leadership that I learned, how I grew the business, but more importantly, what I learned about a leader. Oh, she has a copy over here. You're all getting a copy of the book. So that, yeah, eventually it was supposed to be here, but with supply chain being what it is, it wasn't here in time. But so I'm not going to tell all those stories because I don't want to ruin the surprise that comes in the reading of the book. So when we were talking about some extra things, this was a topic I said, hey, Dennis, do you think they would like this? He was like, I think we would like this, which is the centered leader. Living and leading with a journey mindset. So what exactly does that mean? Well, I'll start by just giving you a teaser, because you kind of have to understand, like, where am I coming from? It's like, why is this a topic that I would care about? Have you ever heard this phrase before? The journey matters as much as the destination. Okay? I've heard it. I never bought it. I thought, well, that's what, you know, people who are real slow and thoughtful about life tell people like us who are driven and fast, you know, that it's supposed to matter. And I thought, man, I don't buy that. I am a destination person. I am focused on the goal. I know where I want to go and how I want to get there. I can't get there fast enough. And I think always in my early stages of my career, the critique I always got was, Elise, you're too impatient. You know, you always want to be further than you are. And I was like, why can't I be? And I think, to be clear, I think that's great. I think that is a gift, to be driven, to be goal-oriented, to want to achieve great things in life. But I will tell you that it was also almost my downfall, because I let it become all that I thought about. It became my singular focus, was how to get to there, whatever there it was I wanted to accomplish. And once I got to there, then I wanted to get to the next there, and the next, and the next, and the next. It was never enough. And that has a way of sort of, you know, sucking all the life out of you, because you lose perspective about what all of life is supposed to be like. Life is meant to be savored and experienced, not accomplished. And so, but it takes a bit of thinking to shift your mindset into embracing that. What I did was, I kind of came to a point where I almost crashed, not literally, but figuratively, emotionally, spiritually. I was putting all I had into building my business, to building Mitchell Communications Group, which I loved with a passion, like my third child. But that was part of the problem, is I loved it too much. And I wasn't really investing in and nurturing all the other relationships in my life. My marriage, my children, my friends and community, certainly not my relationship with God. I didn't have time for those things. I really had to focus on my business. So you can tell yourself all kinds of convenient stories that help you make sense of the choice you want to make. But I want to caution you about that, because that can lead to a lot of regret in your life. And a lot of that's very avoidable if you can learn to think of yourself in a different way. So what I did, long story short, again, this will come out in the book, but I came to a point where my husband kind of sat me down and he said, you know, we need to talk. We all love you, but nobody really likes you anymore. You know, he'd gotten a call from the office that day. I had sort of a meltdown at the office where I was pounding my fist on the table and telling my people they were not good enough. And it wasn't that I wasn't holding myself to the same expectation, but the expectations that I had for myself and others were just too high. It was too intense for too long. And people were like, you know, we don't really know what's happened to her. Where's the original person we wanted to work with and for? Where did she go? We don't really see that person anymore. The good news is there is a way back from that point. And I remember when he told me, he said, I got a call from the office, you know, and I was like, uh-oh. And he said, Elise, you've got to change. And, you know, I didn't argue with him at all because I knew he was right. But I looked at him, you know, as sort of the tears began to flow, and I said, I know I need to change. I don't know how. What would it look like to live life differently? Because it seems like it's working. It's all of you who can't get on with the right program, you know. And that's the journey. Is you have to say, okay, I'm going to have to shift some things. I'm going to have to make different choices. I'm going to have to think differently about my life. And one of the things that we did is he said, you know, we haven't gone on a vacation together in years, you and I. We've been raising children and building careers, so we need to go away together. So if you've ever negotiated a vacation with anybody you love, you know it really is a negotiation. And at the very end of it all, you know, in all of my insisting of how we should do this trip, in a moment of insanity, I agreed to get on the back of a motorcycle with him riding and me on the back and take a 10-day trip together. And I remember thinking, this is going to be awful. Like, you know, it's going to be ruined your hair to wear a helmet. What if it rains? I'm not even in charge. I don't even get to be in control. You know, like I can't. The view's probably not very good for the back. It's not going to be great at all. But I will tell you, I got on the back of his bike and I never looked back. I was hooked on motorcycling. It was absolutely the most intoxicating way to travel. The sights, the sounds, the smells, I felt so alive. So I always like to stop at this point and just ask if I have any fellow riders in the room. Okay, oh, we do. What do you ride?
Well, my husband, I ride the back.
You ride on the back. Okay, that's good. What kind of bike do you have?
He has a Honda.
A Honda, okay, good. I've had a Honda once. In fact, that was my last bike, was a Honda CBR 300R. It's the one that's on the cover of the book. It's sleek, it's red, and it's fast. That's probably all you need to know. But it was life-changing. And I remember at that moment, those 10 days, I was just like, man, I never have fun like this anymore. I think I used to, but I don't now. What is different? And it was just a sense of enjoying the journey again. Because when you ride on a motorcycle, you don't ride to get somewhere, you ride to ride. You ride to ride. Is that a concept you could wrap your mind around? You ride to ride. And the whole point of that is it's really more about the journey, not the destination. And I remember thinking, well, that doesn't make any sense. Like, if we're not going somewhere, what's the whole point? You ride to enjoy the ride. And that was a gift for me to rediscover the joy in the journey. When I came back, Ray said, you need to learn to ride your own bike. I was like, no, I'm happy to be here on the back, you know, listening to music and taking pictures, you know, and thinking about life. And he said, no, you were meant to ride. So I took the motorcycle safety course. And I remember I was sitting in a motorcycle dealership on a Friday night in Springdale, Arkansas, and I was surrounded by about 15 other people, all walks of life, all there to learn how to ride a motorcycle, or not, you know. A lot of people walked away at some point, said, I can't do it, it's not for me. But we had an instructor, his name was Big Mike. He's just exactly like you would expect Big Mike to be, you know, he was big. He had a black leather vest and tattoos on his arms. But this guy was incredibly knowledgeable about motorcycles, and he said something of all the things they taught us that night. We had to pass a written test and study, and there was a lot of stuff to learn. But I remember at one point in the evening, he said something that really made us all kind of sit up and take notice. He said, I'm going to teach you something that's going to save your life. You would sit up and take notice, right? If somebody told you that. He said, you know, the most dangerous place to be on a motorcycle is an intersection for obvious reasons. People are turning and all that. But he said the second most dangerous place you could be on a bike is in a turn. We were like, why in a turn? He said, well, in a turn is where a lot of hazards gather. Gravel, oil slicks, potholes, all kinds of things that would make your bike slide as you're turning. Not to mention the trajectory of the turn itself, because sometimes you're navigating that turn and you're going too fast or too slow. You might end up in the ditch. Worse yet, you might end up in the oncoming lane. So you really have to be very intentional and thoughtful about the turn. So he said, here's what I'm going to tell you. He said, as you approach a turn, I want you to look into the turn, and I want you to assess the hazards that are there. You got to look ahead, make a plan, know what you're going to do, how you're going to navigate all of those potential hazards, but you don't stare straight into the turn. He said, if you do that, there's actually a name for it. It's called target fixation. He said, the reason that's bad is your bike follows your eyes. So he said, where you look is where you go. So he said, don't stare straight into the pothole. That's where you're going to end up, and that's not a good place to be. So he said, instead of doing that, he said, I want you to look through the turn. And basically the idea is keep your eyes focused where you want to end up, and your bike will get you there. And I remember thinking, what a concept. What a concept. Looking through the turn. So the idea is you sort of keep one eye on the road in front of you to make a plan to navigate the hazards that are there, but you don't stare into the hazards because they'll suck you right in, right? You keep one eye on where you want to end up, and you trust the process to get where you want to go. I thought, oh, this is good. And not only did it help me with motorcycling, of course, it's a fundamental principle, but it really kind of helped me think about life. And how do I be more of a leader who can look and lead through the turn? How can I do that? And so part of that leads to this idea of being a centered leader, because it required me to think differently about how I get there, to be more mindful of the journey itself and the navigation of all of the hazards that are absolutely going to be there, but never lose sight of where I want to end up. How do you do that? Like, is that something you think you would like to know? I certainly wanted to know that. And it has been a journey to figure it out. Now, as Dennis mentioned, I had a public relations firm, Mitchell Communication Group. I did sell it. I spent about 7 years with our parent company. That was an amazing and interesting part of my journey. But I knew in my heart I was an entrepreneur. So I wanted to go on and do something again. And I decided to pivot and become an executive coach and a consultant, which is what I do now. So I got my training as an executive coach at the Neuro Leadership Institute. Taught me a lot about neuroscience. And that just opened a whole new door to me to think about the brain and how much you have control over how you think and how you behave. And it's been just gold to be able to share that with my clients. So I'm going to be sharing with you what I share with a lot of my clients who are much older than you, so you're going to have a leg up on them because you're going to be learning now some of these very practical strategies for how to think about shifting mindset and being more centered as a leader as you navigate through the turns of life. I hope that sounds interesting to you. So I have a question. I want you to think about this. Tell me what is coming to your mind. There's no right or wrong about this. Just like, hey, what does it mean to you? How do you feel when you are centered? Call out the first thing that's coming to your mind.
Grounded.
Okay, good. Calm.
Joyful. Peaceful. Fulfilled.
Yeah. All good words, right? You kind of keep thinking more and more and more. It's like, oh yeah, when I'm centered, like, what would that feel like physically? What would it feel like emotionally? How would I show up differently if I was centered, whatever that looks and means? And so I actually developed some of this content into a presentation in the pandemic. Big surprise, because a lot of my clients, even before I was working with them, but pre-pandemic, still had a lot of things they were struggling with, but this, of course, became a big, big question. They said, how in the world am I supposed to show up in the middle of all of this chaos and all of this uncertainty? So I thought, I got to dig into this and figure some of this out. Like, how could I help them? So I began to really think about this concept. What would it look like to be more centered as leader? So centeredness is a thing. You go out there and you could Google search it, you'll find a lot of stuff on centeredness. The way I sort of think of it, it kind of boils down to a state of being physically, sort of like how am I showing up the way you would observe me physically in the moment? How am I showing up mentally? And sort of what is the ability to command myself, my whole self, in all of those ways. That's what centeredness might look like if I could really kind of grasp it a little bit more. So when I'm centered, I am many of the words that you suggested. I had thought of a couple more, and certainly as I've worked with my clients, we could have a long list here. But I feel focused, grounded was mentioned, comfortable in my own skin, feeling a sense of wholeness and rightness. Kind of gets to the idea of character, doesn't it, Dennis? A little bit wholeness and rightness, integrity as a person, sort of what you see is what you get, and I'm feeling good about that. Calm and confident, in control of my emotions. We're going to talk about that here in a couple minutes. Not easily swayed. I like this one particularly. Able to stand my ground, especially when I'm standing up for right things, right, good things, in the face of maybe people who want to change my mind or who want to argue with me, but I can stand my ground and feel confident. I have a clear point of view and I feel good about that. And present, fully present in the moment, not distracted, not elsewhere in my mind, but here and now, and listening and being attuned to what really is. That's what present is. So, would you like to know a little bit more about how in the world you're going to accomplish that? So I'm going to give you the real quick primer on some neuroscience about how your brain works. Because as I began to learn some of these principles, I thought, oh my goodness, this is incredibly practical to daily leadership. Walking with people in the workplace, in your work environment, in your school environment, you every day are thinking about things, and you would love to be able to control more of your brain if you could, but the first thing you gotta do is you gotta figure out how it works. So you may have seen a cutaway of a brain like this. If you were taking a science class at all, this would be very familiar to you. There are two parts labeled on the left that I want you to pay most attention to. So the first part we're going to talk about is the prefrontal cortex. So this is the part, it's in the conscious part or the thinking part of your brain. It's actually right here behind your forehead. It controls a lot of your higher level, more complex thinking like decision making, strategy. This is where inhibition happens, which is your brain's braking system. So it's all the things you're not supposed to say or do. It's controlled by your prefrontal cortex. Then the other part of the brain I want you to pay attention to is the limbic system. It's actually kind of right here in the back of the brain. It's in the unconscious part of the brain, at the top of your spinal cord. This is where the amygdala resides, if you've heard of an amygdala hijack. This is the unconscious part of your brain that deals with automatic responses, such as emotional responses to things, reactions. This is also, interestingly, where your brain's fight, flight, or freeze response resides. So this is an automatic part because it's unconscious, right? It happens without you thinking about it. So the first principle I want to teach you is about these two parts of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, or the PFC, and the limbic system. Very interestingly, they do not work well at the same time. Now, why would that be? Well, as it turns out, they're both fuel intensive. So what is brain's fuel? Besides blood and oxygen, your brain really needs three things to function at a high level. Water, so you gotta stay hydrated throughout the day. Glucose, not just sugar, good nutrition throughout the day. And what do you think? The most underrated brain fuel there is? Sleep. Thank you. You guys already know this. Water, glucose, and sleep. When I was your age, you know, and even when I was building my business, I would sort of pride myself on not needing a lot of sleep. That was a dumb thing to do because my brain was not operating at a very high level. So if you tell yourself, I need to be cognitively performing at a very high level, Or I need good emotional management. Who doesn't need both of those things? I need water. I need to be feeding myself well, and I need rest. This is how God has designed your brain to work. It's kind of simple, but we don't live that way. So just argue with yourself a little bit. If I want to be able to perform at a high level tomorrow, what do I need to do today to get my brain fully optimized and fueled up and ready for the fight, whatever it might be? So that's important to know. The limbic system and the prefrontal cortex work opposite each other. So if think about it, if I'm thinking deeply and my PFC is all lit up and working very hard, let's say I'm writing a paper for class or something like that. So thinking, my limbic system is going to kind of go quiet. Why? Because all the fuel is going to run the PFC. Likewise, if I'm surprised or if I'm upset or I'm threatened by anything at all, my limbic system takes up, right, gets in charge, lights up, my PFC goes quiet, which sort of explains that when I'm upset or shocked or threatened or disturbed or whatever it is, I don't think clearly. Which might also explain why you're thinking, why in the moment could I not even string a sentence together? Well, because your limbic system was thinking, protect, protect, protect. And your PFC was like, well, we'll see you later, because all the fuel is going somewhere else. So you're like, blah, blah, blah. And so there's a trick for that, which is, how do you think your way through any situation? You have to call the PFC back into the conversation by thinking, by asking questions, by considering new ideas, by tackling challenge, anything that gets you thinking again, instead of reacting emotionally. This is a big kind of thing to pay attention to. If you tell yourself, I can think my way through any situation, always better, this is the key takeaway, always better let your PFC be in charge. Would you rather think your way through something, or would you rather react emotionally? I don't know about you, but when I react emotionally, I often don't show up very well, and I have to circle back around and apologize and try to recover from something I did that I shouldn't have done, or something I said, or some way I portrayed myself that hurt somebody else. That's when I'm letting my limbic system drive. But when I'm thinking, I'm often stopping and going, well, wait a minute, maybe I'm jumping to a conclusion here. Maybe I'm misreading the situation. Like, maybe I should press a little bit further and ask for more information and try to really get at what it is that's bothering me so I can get some clarity, right? That's thinking your way through a situation instead of reacting emotionally. Second principle to know, threats and rewards. So this is actually your brain's organizing principle. All day long, from the time you wake up in the morning to the time you go to bed at night, your brain is constantly scanning the environment around you looking for just two things: a threat to stay away from, and a reward to move toward. So, look at the picture on the screen. I was like, well, this is easy, right? I'll put a gigantic jar of M&Ms on the screen, and I'm going to say, isn't this the ultimate reward? And you might look at me and go, nah, I'm not a chocolate person. Now, hazelnut, I'm all about. Or if you had a great new pair of sneakers on the screen, or you had a vacation plan, you get where I'm going here. Just because I think it is a reward doesn't mean you think it's a reward. Same thing with threats. Just because you're upset by something, I might be like, what's the big deal? Right? So this is an interesting principle about the brain. Threats and rewards are different for everyone. Now, there's some common things that, we're all generally threatened or rewarded by, but it is not a good idea to assume you know. To say, well, because I think this way, you should too. And then I'm just puzzled as to why you don't think like me. I remember, you could write this one down. This is good sort of truth, timeless truth. I learned this in my coaching training. They said, no two brains are alike. We kind of wrote it down like, yes, so that makes sense. And they're like, but you don't live that way, do you? I thought, no. I'm walking around married to my husband 34 years thinking, why doesn't he think like I do? And he's always like, why does she always think that I will think the way she does? No two brains are alike, which is kind of the majesty of God, right? Is that we're created very individually. So it's wrong for me to assume that you know what I think, or that you're threatened by the same things I are, or that you're rewarded by them. Just assume you don't know. So what could you do instead? Could ask, right? Hey, tell me, what would success look like for you? Or if you sense that somebody is threatened by that, say, hey, tell me more about that. What's going on for you in this? That's interesting. I'm curious, because that's not happening for me, but I see it's happening for you. Do you see where I'm getting with this? Is you're using your PFC to figure out the puzzle. What's going on with this person? Or what's going on with myself? And why am I feeling the way that I am? Third principle, social threats and physical threats. So I will be honest to tell you, when I heard this principle, I did not believe it. Because I thought, how can that be true? And here's the principle. Our brains and our bodies react the same, sometimes worse, to a social threat as we do to a physical threat. And I thought, how can that be? Because a physical threat, isn't that like the biggest deal there is? Isn't that the worst thing that could happen to you? Well, maybe not. And if you think about it, so let me just stop there and say, what would a social threat be? So social threats are anything that make us feel bad, like embarrassment, love lost or rejection, making a mistake in front of people, feeling a failure, looking foolish, feeling marginalized, not taken seriously, all those things that make us kind of, feel threatened, right? That's a social threat. It's not physical. But so much research has been done to show that physical threats, very often, we can recover from. Even really significant ones. Very often, we can recover from them, or we can learn a workaround from them. But a social threat sometimes can live with you for years, right? You might even know a moment in your mind, a defining moment of bitterness in your life, that when you think about it, you feel the tightness in the chest and your stomach tying into knots and your heart racing because you remember what it felt like. That is a social threat. So, not surprisingly, social threats trigger which part of your brain? Limbic system, right? Defensive response. Oh my goodness, here it comes again. The last time I tried this, I made such a fool of myself. I felt so awful. Whatever it was, you're like, see it coming again, and you get scared, right? You're protecting yourself. Your brain's saying, oh, don't go there. That didn't work out last time, right? That's normal. That's how the way the human brain works. But it doesn't always serve us very well because it holds us back from trying things that we should try and be willing to continue to get better at, and eventually it isn't even a problem, right? But if we give in to the limbic system too often, we live in this sort of state of threat all the time. Instead of saying, I want to think my way through this. I want to see if there's some opportunity for me in this. Fourth principle is what we call a torn and away mindset. So when I'm in that threat state that I just described for you, the brain does kind of an interesting thing. The limbic system's in charge. Prefrontal cortex goes quiet. You're not really thinking very well. And instead, you're kind of closing in because you're going into protection mode. And when that happens, you don't hear very well. You've ever, people say something to you and you're like, you kind of heard it, but you didn't hear. You listened, but you didn't hear, or hear, but you didn't listen. Whatever, you kind of goes in and out the other. To I'm not really sure what they said, You begin to think, I know what she's thinking. She's trying to, get me out of this, or doesn't want me. Our inner critic gets really loud. We become very closed. And that's why they call it an away mindset. It's classic, remember, we move away from threats. So the away mindset is, I'm moving away. And if you've ever seen somebody physically do this, right? They close up, they look at their phone, they turn away, whatever it might be, because they want to get away. That's an away mindset or a closed mindset. Not a great place to be. We've all been in it. We've seen other people be in it. This also means the person is less likely to be willing to try anything. They're not willing to accept change because it's all about protecting. The flip side is actually a beautiful place to be. It's called the toward mindset, because why? Remember, we move toward rewards. So when you talk to me about something that sounds interesting or has the potential for a reward for me, my ears perk up. And I kind of lean in. I move toward the conversation. I move toward the opportunity. I move toward the reward. And all of a sudden, my mind begins to start making all these interesting connections, like, what she's talking about, this sounds interesting. Wonder what this could mean for me. Maybe there's something good here. And your brain becomes very open. And it's really cool because they actually do studies where they can watch the brain lighting up in all kinds of places because the brain is trying to make connections, to make sense of what's happening. And this toward mindset means that you are much more opportunistic, you're much more willing to try, you are more creative, you begin to see solutions you never saw before. Why? Because your brain is thinking. So which part of the brain is in charge? The prefrontal cortex, right? This is a classic toward state of mind. It's a beautiful place to be for yourself and for others. And so how do we think about using those things? The key for this is I want you to really embrace this idea is that in shifting mindset from an away state to a toward state, you actually have more control than you think you do. Have you ever thought to yourself, well, I can't help how I feel. I can't help what I think. Well, you can. You can. That's the good and the bad news. You can. You can shift your mindset and to think very differently about what's happening to you and around you and what you're going to do about it. But the first thing you have to do when you sort of understand how your brain works is to say, well, how do I kind of turn down that very loud voice that's in my head, that inner critic, which would be a whole nother conversation for us to have, but that inner critic that is just being so loud, how do I turn down that volume? Kind of tame the mind and control the thoughts a little bit more, because I will tell you, this is just important to kind of understand. God has designed our brains to be very, very active all of the time. This is how we move through the world. So it is completely normal that you would have thoughts, feelings, worries, storylines, narratives in your head, voices, all those things are just normal parts of how the brain is trying to make sense of the world. But of course you get to things like limiting beliefs too, right? Or the rumination, the sort of the nonstop link of what isn't working very well. But these are the things you have to at least just recognize and say, hey, this is normal. This is how the brain works. But I want to be a little more in control of that. I don't want it to steamroll me. I don't want it to sweep me away. So to take control of what you think, I've got a couple of strategies for you, very practical. See if at least one of them might work for you. The first one, I love this one because it is visual. And my husband and I, in addition to motorcycling, we love to hike. I don't know if anybody else is a hiker and loves to hike. But I want you to imagine yourself on a hike in the woods and you hear the sound of running water, rushing water. And of course that always attracts us, where's the creek or the stream? And lo and behold, you come out into this, you see this beautiful waterfall. And the water is just flowing down the side of this cliff. You're standing sort of safely there in the right-hand corner on that rock, and you're looking at this waterfall. It's like, wow, this is amazing. It's beautiful, and the power of the water and just the stream of all the water that's flowing through it is going down into the river beside you. But you are standing safely on the ledge. This is exactly how I want you to think of the stream of consciousness in your mind. All of those thoughts and ideas and worries and things you're trying to remember and storylines in your head and all that. I want you to do what we sort of think of in coaching, we talk about this a little bit, is practice the art of self-observation, which is how can I sort of see this happening in my mind, but I step away from it a little bit. I create some distance or separation from the thoughts. To say, yep, I see that. I know I'm thinking that. There's my inner critic going again, but I'm not going to be swept away by it. I can control my thoughts more than I think I can. And just by simply saying that, which part of your brain are you calling into action? You're thinking your way through the situation. But you're giving yourself a little bit of self-grace, self-love by saying, hey, this is normal. Everybody has this. Everybody's got the stream flowing. The question is, are you jumping in and are you drowning? Are you standing safely on the ledge saying, yep, I see it, but just because I think it, I don't have to believe it. And just because I feel it, I don't have to act upon it, right? These are all things you can say to yourself. Hey, it's okay. It's normal to feel this way, normal to think these things, but I don't have to believe it. I can say, yep, that's my inner critic going. Boy, when she gets going, she got a whole storyline for me. Most of it isn't true, and I know it doesn't serve me well. So I'm not buying into it. I see it, but I'm not being swept away. That is just a baby step of how you practice self-observation. Be aware of it. Don't beat yourself up. Accept it non-judgmentally, but don't be swept away by it. Because here's what I will tell you. When you face challenge in life, as you will your whole life, that's part of the twists and the turns of the journey. When you face challenge, it is your mindset that really matters the most. You probably had somebody in your life who has told you this, is that life doesn't turn out the way that it should, right? We didn't get to summit like we should have. Life turns out the way that it does. It's what you do in response to what happens that matters the most. Defines who you are as a person, teaches you things in life, helps you keep putting one foot in front of the other to keep moving forward anyway. And all of us have stuff happen to us that we didn't want to happen. But it happens. And so how are you going to react and respond is really the key. And this is where I think this idea is so important for us. I know you know this, but just remind yourself, hey, I always have a choice. I can be angry about it. I can resist it, I can be bitter, I can let that define me, kind of take over who I am, have me pounding my fist on the chest of people. Or I can say, nah, I'm not doing that. I'm not buying in. I want to be more resilient. I want to figure out a way to win. It may be a different path. It may be not plan A or B or C. It could be plan D. But I'm not going to give up. I'm still going to try to find a way forward. I'm just going to maneuver around those hazards, and I'm not going to fixate on the targets. I'm going to still keep my eyes focused on where I want to end up. And I'll get there eventually. I'll get there. And who knows, maybe the path to get there will be a lot better than what I had planned for myself. So, another couple of strategies to try. And let's do a time check, Dennis. How are we doing? Okay, we're good. A couple more strategies. These are cognitive strategies, and you may have heard this. Anybody in a psychology class or anybody might be familiar with this. These are gold. These are really, really helpful. Simple ones. I'm going to give them to you kind of quick, but I want you to think of like what one could work for you. So one of the simplest cognitive strategies out there is called labeling, and the nickname is called name it to tame it. You may have heard that before. So the reason it's called name it to tame it, because they say just by naming how you feel, you kind of calm the emotion down, the impact of it. Now, why would that be? Because when you have to think about naming it, which part of the brain is lighting up, right? You're thinking your way through it. If you said, Elise, what are you feeling? And I'd be like, I don't know, I'm frustrated. Okay, that all of a sudden, it just kind of, just a little bit, I'm not so frustrated, because I'm like, I'm frustrated. And she might say, yeah, me too. I know how that feels. Oh, okay, that's normal. There's not something wrong with me, which is the next one, normalizing. It's not just me. Other people feel like this. Or it's normal that someone in my situation would feel this way. That's okay. That's normalizing. That's a very helpful strategy. Here's another one that's good. I like this one a lot, especially for the harder moments in life. On a scale of 1 to 10, how big of a deal is this really? In the whole scheme of my life, really, how big of a deal is this? And you know, when it's bad, you'd say, well, it's 14. I'm pretty sure it may be worse than that. Because in the moment, that's how it feels, right? But then you step back and say, yeah, but you know, really, count my blessings. I got my health. I've got opportunity. I have my whole life. I've got all these things. Why would I let this one thing derail me so much? It's maybe an 8 or a 9, and you know, over time it'll probably be a 4 or 5, and then eventually I might even forget this ever happened, or I will learn some valuable lesson in life, right? So you have a way of sort of thinking differently about it. Another one's called repositioning, which is, like I need to consider somebody else's perspective here. How might a friend or a mentor advise me? So I can get a little bit out of my own head and say, what would you tell me here? Friend, mentor, someone tell me what to think? How to think differently, getting a fresh perspective. Distancing, I like this one. I use this a lot in the pandemic with a lot of my clients. I said, okay, so let's just fast forward a year from now. When you look back, how do you want to say that you showed up at this moment in time? How do you want to look back and feel proud of yourself? No matter what was happening, how did you show up, right? It's a kind of a way of going, oh, you know, I want to show up and I want to be proud of myself. I want to have a level head. I want to be more centered. I want to be fair. I want to have courage, whatever it is. But that gives you a sense of vision for yourself of, well, I can be those things. I just need to decide that I'm going to try to be those things. And then reframing. This is probably the most powerful one of all. Especially when something really, really difficult happens, you say, what good can come from this? Maybe we can have a slice of summit instead of having the full summit. We'll find a way, right? We'll still find something good to come from this is one of the most powerful. Reframing is really, really good. So just think a minute, ask yourself, which one is most useful for you? Which of those could you use in some situation you're facing right now? Just pick one and say, yeah, I'm gonna try it. I always tell my clients, try it, see what result you get. If it didn't work, you learned that, you learned something. If it did work, hey, you're on to a better result. Be willing to try something and see if it gets a better result for you. So then mindfulness is the other technique I wanted to talk a little bit about, and I'm gonna give you a little bit of a different twist on it. So we've all heard mindfulness. Most people have, especially even in the business world. Thankfully, these days, that's a more common conversation that people are willing to have. But do we actually practice it? I don't know about you, but I talk a good game on mindfulness. I don't always do it because I get up and I rush, and I'm like, wait a minute, I haven't even got myself centered here. So mindfulness, just to you kind of know exactly what is it. Mindfulness is a state of being that allows you to settle into your body, sense how you're feeling, and accept those feelings without judging. Now, I will tell you, that's the hardest part for me, because I can sense how I'm feeling and not be happy about it. Can I sense what I'm feeling and practice self-observation and say, yep, I get it, I see it, but I'm not going to be swept away by that. I'm going to try to think how I can get through this, how I can manage this a little bit better. Mindfulness is a practice that allows you to become better at doing this. It puts you more in the moment. And I always like to sort of argue and say, you know, mindfulness, people say, yeah, like that's a waste of time. But it's really not. It is not sort of blissing out or sort of, you know, going into some sort of space. It is actually waking up. It's making you a lot more clear about what is. And I love that. I think that's really, really meaningful. So I'm telling you, and I would say you're telling me, that if I practice this is going to do this for me. How does that work? So it's just 3 simple steps where you sit comfortably in your chair. Just put your hands, why don't y'all do it for a minute? Everybody sit comfortably in your chair. Kind of get your back straight. Rest your hands just lightly on your legs. Just get comfortable. Rest your hands lightly on your legs. Close your eyes. That helps always. I want you to take a deep breath. Just take a deep breath in. Hold it for a minute, then just let it out. Easy. Let it out. Take another deep breath in. Feel it filling your lungs. And then just let it out. Easy. Take another deep breath in. Just let it out easy. Kind of feel your heartbeat slow down just a little bit. Feel your hands just rest. Shoulders relax. Feet calm. This feels peaceful. Keep taking a deep breath in. Let it out. And as you're doing this, just focus on your breathing. Just focus on breathing. Deep breath in, Deep breath out. Feel present, calm, peaceful. Okay, come back to me now. Open your eyes. We could do this for a long time. You can do full body scans, if you've ever heard of that, where you start here and you move down, move down. And I remember the first time I tried to do this, I did one of those. I had, I don't know if y'all have ever gotten one of the apps. Have you ever tried one of the apps? Yeah. I remember first time somebody said, you know, you need to practice this. I was like, there's a lot better things I can do with 3 minutes than sit there and breathe, you know. And I was looking at my phone like every 30 seconds or every 20 seconds or so. I'm like, has it been 3 minutes yet? And I thought, you know, this is kind of sad that I cannot sit for 3 minutes and breathe peacefully and control my mind. And I thought, no wonder I feel so uncentered. No wonder I am trying to run at a crazy pace. And I'm kind of off the edge here. So what is the point? Is there a point to this? Absolutely, there's so many points to this, which is mindfulness helps you develop focus and clarity by simply doing an exercise like that. And you'll be surprised if you can go as long as 20 minutes or more as you work up the skill to focus and have clarity. You are practicing and strengthening the muscle of focus because all you're thinking about is your breathing. You're not letting your mind run away with all of your thoughts and storylines. You're more aware of what is. You begin to notice what something smells like. If somebody were to walk by that had perfume on, or you hear a sound of a bird outside of a window you didn't hear before, but there it was. You just didn't notice it. Right? A lot of the time in the pandemic, I think, helped us with this, to be more attuned to what was happening around us. We listen more deeply. We understand more readily. My mind, my PFC, is thinking. I have that toward mindset as opposed to the away mindset. I'm not threatened. I'm open. I'm searching. I'm curious. I'm interested. This is the toward mindset. You can practice mindfulness 3 minutes, anytime, right in the morning, right before you walk into class. If you have to go to the bathroom and just sit down a minute, just think, take just 3 minutes of deep breath, or just 3 deep breaths before I have to walk in and take that test or give that presentation. Whatever it is, just calm yourself. Get your prefrontal cortex being in charge so you can think your way through anything. Now, we're going to turn to questions here in just a second to see what questions you have. I just want to kind of leave you with the fact that there's a lot of Christian mindfulness resources that you can tap into. I don't know if anybody has heard of any of these. Encounter, Calming Grace, Abide. Has anybody heard of any of these things? They're all really good. Jot those down if you think you might want to check them out. Encounter is a daily email you can get where somebody gives you a guided meditation on a scripture. And I've used it before where you just listen for a couple of minutes and you're trying to go to sleep. If you have to unwind that anxious mind, you know, this guy's voice puts you to sleep in a couple of minutes. Calming Grace is a gal that blogs. She does beautiful work in her writing. Abide is actually video. It's a video channel you can get too that helps you with these things. But it's all, what I love about it is there's so many mindfulness resources, but these are for people of faith who want to really tap into their faith. And there's so many benefits. I think the Bible actually teaches us a lot about being more mindful and how to be more thoughtful and intentional about how we live. See some of the scriptures here that I think could probably resonate with you, scriptures you've heard before, but thinking about them maybe in a different way, which is 1 Peter 5:7 is cast your anxieties on God because he cares for you. Can you give things over to God so you can feel less overwhelmed by negative feelings and emotions and rumination? Like, how do I give that to God? You've seen the little cross stitch, let go, let God, you know, that's pretty good. It's very simple, kind of makes sense when you think about it. More emotional balance, Galatians 5:22, the fruits of the Spirit. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Someday I will master those, but it's a journey every day, right, to kind of work on those and feel a little bit more like I have more equilibrium in a world that feels incredibly unbalanced. And if I focus on developing more of those in my life, I will feel more centered. Philippians 3, forgetting what lies behind and pushing forward to what lies ahead, right? I press on to the prize that I have been called for. This is in Philippians 3. If anybody could tell us the truth of this, it was Paul, right? I put behind my life that was not so great, and I focus on what God has planned for me ahead. To me, it's such an inspiring idea. Inspired creativity, Ephesians 2. We are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works. And I love this because guess what? I'm a destination person. I like to work. And I think God gave us work to do, gifts and talents to use. So I say use that as an inspiration of go forth and create. Figure out what you're great at. And use that to change the world for good and impact people for good. That's where the real joy in life comes. And that can be in your work. It doesn't have to be, but it can be. And that's a blessing from God to be able to do those things. So just some thoughts for you, some simple things you can do. Even as you say, I just don't have the time. Or if it occurs to you in the moment, you could say, I'm going to do a 2-word affirmation right here and right now. I'm just going to say, God's grace. Or I'm going to say, my fortress. That's one of my favorites, my fortress, especially when I'm feeling frightened or lost or not as courageous as I want to be. I say, God, he is my fortress. He is my strength. He is my shield. Simple 2-word affirmations can work. The beauty of nature, to get out and realize the heavens declare the glory of God. That waterfall is there for a reason because it makes my mind work in beautiful ways. Flash prayers. Praying God's blessing on one person or one situation. Just when it occurs to you, just do it. That's the way I think we should be in prayer on a regular basis. It doesn't have to be long, drawn out. It can be, but it can be just oh my goodness, I'm thinking of my friend right now. God be with my friend. Is a great way to pray, right? Because it's happening in the moment when you think of it. And moments of gratitude is just thanking God. What I do is I have a thing where every morning I wake up, look up at the ceiling, because I'm thinking of the light in the room or whatever, and I think, okay, when am I going to shine the spotlight on one thing I am grateful to God for? What would that be? And sometimes it's like my dog or my health or my husband or ACU or whatever it may be. Just something, like today, doesn't have to be big, it just be one thing I am grateful for. Before you put your feet on the floor, start you off in a toward state of mind. Think about the world in a positive way. So those are little things that you can try. So just what one thing would you be willing to try? What one idea have I suggested that is something you would be willing to try that might work for you? Just think of one thing. Give it a go. See what result you get. You might have a better result than you've had before. So just putting it all together, thinking about living the centered life, using your PFC, right? Think your way through every situation. Don't react. Take more control of what you think to put yourself in more of a toward mindset rather than the away mindset. Don't get swept away by that waterfall of thoughts and feelings, right? Just because I think it, I don't have to believe it. Stand back and observe. Be more present to see what really is. Try some of those cognitive strategies. Increase your focus with more faith-filled mindfulness.